Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with Reagan Jorgensen, Security Solutions Technician, and Robert Hoffman, Windows System Administrator, both from here at Core. Glad you both could join us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, X.
Absolutely. Glad you're both here. This week's podcast is called Cybersecurity Best Practices, where we'll be doing a case study and talking about best practices that you can put in place to help protect your business information and enhance security. But first, let's learn a little bit about our guests, Reagan and Rob. Let's start with Reagan. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, X. I'm here, a security solutions technician here at Core Business Solutions for a couple years now. I have a lot of hands-on experience, real-world experience. I've got certifications and degrees in the industry and excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. How about you, Rob? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I have a good amount of years in technology professionally. I started out interning, and then I had a gig at a MSP where I had multiple clients and handled all their internal procedures, networking, all that. And now I'm lucky to be at Core as a sole system administrator.
You both do a great job. I work with Rob a little bit more than I do Reagan because with all the technology we have in the studio, you're always helping me when we have, why won't this update, yada, yada, yada.
Always happy to help out. And technology is a burden, can be confusing at times, but that's why I have a job.
That's right. That's right. Well, we appreciate both you guys here at Core. So today we're going to start with a case study. We're going to look at an early breach back in 2011 with Sony, and we're going to kind of talk about how that kind of got the ball rolling to what cybersecurity is today. Now, the attack first was detected in April of 2011, and Sony took its online services offline after discovering the extent of the breach. The PlayStation Network remained unavailable for several weeks as Sony worked to investigate the incident, enhance its security measures, and restore services. Now, what the cyber attack did target the Sony PlayStation Network, compromising personal information of millions of users. The stolen data included names, addresses, email addresses, birth dates, and encrypted passwords. Additionally, the breach exposed users' credit card information as well, leading to concerns about potential identity theft and fraud. The breach had global implications impacting millions of users worldwide. How did they do this? Well, the attackers exploited vulnerabilities in Sony's network infrastructure. The specific techniques used to breach the system were not publicly disclosed. However, it was revealed that the attackers gained unauthorized access to the network, leading to the compromise of sensitive user information. So clearly, Sony had a problem when all that information was accessed by an outside intruder. So Reagan, how has this incident shaped the current state of cybersecurity practices, and what challenges still persist?
Yeah, for sure, X. So this kind of started the whole cybersecurity industry kind of best practices revolution, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But that PlayStation Network, that PSN breach, it just highlighted the expanding threat landscape due to increased connectivity, especially through the Internet of Things and digital technologies. So IoT devices are pretty much just everyday objects like thermostats, lights, refrigerators, anything that can connect to the network and communicate with other devices. And this, honestly, it makes our life easier. So that's why all of us do use those things. But it is still a security risk.
Yeah, and this was a PlayStation gaming console, so a lot of people say those things make their life a lot better. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, so the incident kind of highlighted the evolving nature of cyber threats. It highlighted a bunch of tactics. So the three main tactics were social engineering, zero-day exploits, which was the big one, and then ransomware attacks. These three attacks pose ongoing challenges for cybersecurity practices. And after this PSN attack, security increased across all sectors, specifically implementing security features to fortify network infrastructure and better protect user data. That's the biggest thing. It was a big impact on network infrastructure. And then once they got in from that network, they got all that user data. And those were the two biggest things from this event that kind of shaped where we're at now.
So you mentioned there's three different types of tactics. Could you explain a little bit more about those?
At a base level here, so the first one would be social engineering attacks,
Okay.
which I mentioned, which they're just deceptive attacks to manipulate people into revealing sensitive information. That it's to me one of the most common in any organization is social engineering attacks, because it's just easy for attackers to do. It's an automated process. They just send these things out to people who don't know what's going on. So in an organization, let's say PSN, if they just educated everyone that much more, about phishing or suspicious emails or best practices when you're online or on that network, on that PlayStation network, it might have helped them mitigate some of that risk.
Okay.
And then the second one, I would say zero-day exploits, which it's just exploiting unknown software vulnerabilities, which is to me the hardest one to prevent against, because you don't know what it is until it hits you.
Yeah. Yeah. You're using your computer and wait, what's this?
Yeah, exactly. So in the best way to stop that, because you can't see it you really don't see it coming, the best way to prevent that, I would say, is just regularly update the software and intrusion detection systems. That if you have everything updated all the time and you have those IDSs in place, aware constantly, then you have a better chance of stopping it once it does attack, because you're not going to stop it before it does attack you, but you can, right when it does, mitigate what it actually does to your system.
Gotcha.
The third one, it would be ransomware attacks, which any organization is at risk of this, because attackers want money. Ransomware attacks, they just encrypt files and demand payment for the decryption of those files. So most attackers and hackers, they want to get paid for the fun that they are having.
Yeah. And the thing that's interesting about ransomware, which we don't necessarily think about it, people were like, they're not trying to get your data for them to use it. They just know you want it. So you'll pay them to get your data back.
Exactly.
So that's why it's called a ransomware. It's like, hey, we don't care what's on your computer, but you can't access it and you wanna, or your whole system. So here we got this really wonderful thing. We can take, a credit card or, all this payment information. We'll take care of you and we'll give you your information back. Wasn't that just great of us?
Exactly.
I don't know if I would trust them.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd trust them either.
Exactly. Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say some quick solutions for that, to kind of, at least you just want to back up your data, use security software, and avoid paying ransoms when you can. So you can't trust them all the time. Also, a good thing is maybe look into cyber insurance or something that kind of mitigates your liability almost, but just make sure you're ready for that in the first place.
Yeah. So after a breach happens, what challenges still might persist?
Yeah. So as far as the challenges that persist, this breach at least emphasized the interconnectedness of cybersecurity, emphasizing the need for comprehensive strategies that cover many things: internal systems, external partners, and supply chains, which is a huge one.
So how might we address some of these challenges?
Addressing these challenges, it requires more than just one thing. It's a multifaceted approach. So it includes things such as advanced threat detection systems, employee training, and collaboration across sectors to share that threat intelligence and best practices. So there's these things out there that have common vulnerabilities, CVEs, common vulnerabilities and exposures that people go out. If they get hit with a zero-day attack or any attack, they'll post it out there and you can see, and you're up to date on the latest things. So, it's not just implementing technical solutions, but practical and logical, physical, and then also utilizing your confidants, I guess.
And this can certainly be something that's not just affecting you, but if you're a business and you have a supply chain, you have tons of customers, their information, it's sort of your responsibility to keep that secure. As well as if you do get hit with like a man-in-the-middle attack or something like that, you make those people aware that you've had an issue, so they might not be hit with the same thing.
Absolutely. And that could just tear down the supply chain in an instant, honestly, if the communication's not there.
Absolutely. Well, that is a lot to look at, Reagan. Really appreciate it. Now, Rob, based on some of the factors that Reagan just mentioned, companies really need to have some policies in place to help with those. So that kind of is where it starts. Like, what kind of policies do we need to put in place that's going to protect us and help our employees know about what they should do and things like that? How does policy play a factor in determining those best practices, some of which Reagan may have said?
Policy starts at the baseline for all of this control in an organization. It's what keeps the access, authentication, and privileges all in check. Without policies, there is no control. And within all the various security compliances, a lot of controls are relying on configured policies to comply to those. Policies are what enforces the least privilege, authentication, authorization, encryption, auditing, and monitoring.
Yeah, and least privilege, that's when you only give people access to what they need to do their job. So you're not going to necessarily have somebody completely have access to anything on your server.
Yes, exactly. Like you're not going to want an accounting folder up for grabs for just anybody.
Right, right.
And when working within the cloud, these policies regarding sharing are heightened in importance because you have data that's accessible from pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
Restrictions on sharing are critical when data is shared externally to outside organizations. So a cloud infrastructure has accessibility from anywhere. Thus, the need for authentication is necessary to access the data because you want to make sure that who's accessing that data is who they say they are.
And that they should have access.
Exactly, yeah. And that they should have access to that data. Forcing authentication to view documents are a hassle. I get that they can cause kind of a bottleneck in certain situations, but they are necessary to secure company data and ensure not just anyone can view, edit, or download those files.
That's a really good point. Now, you mentioned how when you're dealing with cloud-based, you can access it anywhere. There's a lot of mobile devices you can access stuff through, and many of us use that. Our phones, tablets, it's just easier to grab information that way than pull out your laptop, turn it on, and check your email or whatever. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, there's mobile device management. These are tools in Microsoft Intune. They can control what devices are able to obtain clearance with an organization's resources. MDM sets requirements for devices before they can be managed. This is what enforces encryption, requiring minimum operating system versions to access the data in company.
So you might need to make sure that you're encrypting the information from that mobile device to whatever you're doing. When you're saying about operating systems, that's something you have to have a certain level of. In this case, it's mainly iOS or Android, right? If you're dealing with a phone.
Correct. Yeah,
like
the phones they'll be iOS, Android, and then with desktop, laptop computers, even servers, you have like Linux, Windows, of course, and so if they're underpatched severely, they're going to be insecure. So you're not going to want them on your network.
Or if they're really old.
Or if they're really old.
If you're running Windows XP, which I know that I have a computer that I have to run XP for something, still some old technology I'm using, and that's not on the internet.
Right, yeah. And install the MDM also is able to install required software, such as the antivirus, and these are all capabilities of the MDM. And these settings are all enforceable with the compliance policies that set this baseline.
Okay.
Conditional access policies, they're another form. They deal more with authentication to access resources. They give great control over what factors need to be met in order to access these applications, data, and resources. Criteria can include specific devices, geographical location, requiring multi-factor authentication, and more.
So there are bad actors known in certain places in the world. So if some way my information and login credentials are being used from Syria or China,
it's going to be a red flag.
It's going to be a big red flag that, Xavier's probably not over there visiting one of those countries trying to access his information, or he would have told us.
Yeah, right. And we have had situations where somebody will go on vacation to like Ireland or something, and we're like, were you just in Ireland? And then they're like, yeah, I was. And then it's all good. But you got to have that alert and check.
Well, and that could be when we're talking about policies, the policies you're talking about are the ones that are the policies that the software uses to run within our system and access and stuff like that. But as a business, you need to make policy. So maybe a policy should be, if you're traveling outside of the continental United States, you need to communicate that with us so we know, hey, if we do get a login from Ireland, that, hey, this is, and it's that particular login, You're not catching
Little
it at
panic.
5 a.m,
Yeah.
panicked, go,
Yeah,
why do we have
absolutely.
somebody accessing from Ireland,
Yeah.
Oh, that's just Jim. He's on vacation over there. That would have been nice to know. Yeah, totally get it.
And there are various methods of policy implementation. There's Microsoft, Google, Amazon. They have all of their different ways of controlling policy for an organization. And it's best to utilize these tools because
Yeah.
they do work.
Yeah, absolutely. And from you being that administrator, you really have to know how that interacts with everything.
Exactly, yeah.
Because you're going to be the one that's like, dude, I don't have access to this and I need it. You got to see how it's going to affect all the people that you're applying the policy to.
Yeah, and that's why testing is also critical in these situations. And to be available if something needs to be accessed, you got to know what policy's enacting it. You got to figure out how to give them access. And so a good background knowledge on what policies are in place is also critical.
Okay. Those are really great points, Rob. Really important for businesses to manage their policies. We're going to head back to Reagan right now on this question. Back to Sony's incident. What preventative measures could other companies learn to protect against a similar cyber threat?
As you can imagine, there are plenty you could probably throw in there. Hindsight's always 20/20. It's hard to kind of know what's going to hit you when it does. So I'll just say that beforehand. There are about 4 or 5, but the first one is implementing a robust network security measures, especially in your network, deploying firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, things like that to monitor and control network traffic. When you do that, it kind of gives you the visibility to detect suspicious activities and prevent the unauthorized access before it happens. Like, let's say they had a very robust system like this with everything in place, all the bells and whistles, they would know instantly. It wouldn't have
They would have
gotten
known
to the-
somebody was trying to get in. Yep.
Yep, 100%. Maybe stopped it a little quicker.
What are some other ones?
Yeah, so another one would be network access control, just kind of implementing a NAC and AAC solutions to enforce security policies and control access to the network based on the kind of endpoint compliance with the security requirements. So,
Okay.
NAC solutions can authenticate and authorize devices before granting that access to whatever network it is that you're trying to access. And it's not very robust. It's not a hard thing to implement. But knowing that you have that NAC in place, you know who's on your network, you know when they're on your network. Just make things more visible, and especially for auditing or compliance, you have those logs of who's on your network.
Right. Okay.
So kind of going forward, the secure configuration management, this is just initial. When you first configure all of your network devices, it's just critical to know that you're doing it securely, knowing everything is getting installed properly. Vulnerabilities, I believe, could have been mitigated and the attack surface reduced if they took a little bit more time ensuring all the network devices were configured securely.
Okay, so you're dealing with, you might have specific names for computers, things like that. You're not just letting Windows or whatever pick the name of the computer, maybe naming it with a protocol, something like that.
Yeah, 100%. Make it more original. Have it be you, and it just kind of makes it more difficult for attackers to exploit those weaknesses. If they're seeing a list of just generic names, and they know that they know maybe that's something I'm going to go exploit now because they haven't changed it. It's
right
out of the box. So yeah, there's many tools that help you do this. Like we talked about with the NAC, it's not that hard. And then there's also, I would just throw in this is just patching. Just make sure you're patching your network systems, all your network devices. Make sure they're up to date. This kind of goes hand in hand. I think it's important.
Okay.
Network segmentation and micro segmentation is pretty much just dividing the network into smaller, isolated segments to limit the spread of cyber threats, using micro segmentation for additional control over communications between those network segments. So each segment or microsegment is typically created based on the criteria such as users, roles, applications, and data sensitivity. If you're at home, this might be a little harder to do. You might not need all of this, but if you have your organization and you have an on-site facility and you have infrastructure, you have network devices, just kind of breaking it all down, maybe not putting certain systems on the intranet,
That's what we do here. I mean, Rob, we have, 3 systems? We have our corporate one. We actually have the studio completely segmented.
Mm-hmm.
I guess segmented, segregated. And then we also have the IoT one that don't cross over to our other ones. Is that correct?
That is correct. And then we also have a guest network for people coming in. We don't want them to have access to all the networking equipment and data that we have internally.
Right.
So that guest network's probably the bare minimum a company should have.
Yeah. Because you don't have anybody walking in or just getting your guest network outside of the building. They're sitting there in their car, and now they have access to your network. You don't want those things communicating with yourself. So something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, the guest network, like Rob said, is essential. And you can do that, if you don't have a big facility, it's not that hard. If you have internet, it's not that hard to implement. It's bare minimum.
Anything else?
I would recommend that if you don't have the experiences or expertise with these security features that we're talking about right now, it's very beneficial to find someone that can kind of offer you this or help configure these type of devices or systems on your network. It's a lot and it gets overwhelming real quick. So if you don't have the full experience and you need to get something in place now, just reach out to people and get that expertise.
A good way to do that is when you're hiring an MSP, if you're looking for one of those, not doing it yourself, make sure you know, at least from a policy standpoint, and I'm not speaking the policies that Rob's talking about, but don't just let them set it up for you and, they know what they're doing. Let them know what your security policies are and limit your least privilege. These people should have this access. These people should have this access. We want to segment this portion from this portion of the network. It might cost you more money, because it's going to take more time. But if they know what you're trying to do from a security standpoint, now they can implement it instead of just going and doing their everyday setup.
Absolutely. And it's going to be costly, but you're not going to control and mitigate all risks. So it's not going to be too costly. You implement what you need at the moment, and then you move forward, and then down the line implement something else.
Yeah, absolutely. This ends part 1 of Cybersecurity Best Practices with Reagan Jorgensen and Robert Hoffman. Please tune in next week for part 2, where we'll talk about the human aspect of cybersecurity, incident response, and have more takeaways from our case study, and also look at current information on what cyber threats affect what types of businesses the most in 2024. Be sure to check it out. And we want to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today. We hope it's been informative for you. If you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions, how we can help you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, or even customized training, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com. Or you can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. And if you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to do so. That way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day, everyone.